Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
In the darkest corners of the galaxy, where laws bend like broken bones and mercy is a luxury few can afford, there exists a trade so vile that even the most hardened criminals whisper about it in hushed tones: the selling of sentient beings. Tonight, in a grimy station orbiting a dying star, one such transaction was about to take place. The merchandise? A young alien girl whose species was prized for their unique abilities. The buyer? A collector known for his cruelty. But what neither the seller nor the buyer knew was that a human freighter captain had just docked at the station. And humans, as the galaxy would soon learn, have a very particular opinion about slavery. Some said humans were just another species trying to make their way among the stars. Others whispered they were dangerous, unpredictable creatures best left alone. But tonight, in the shadowed corridors of Station Zarian 7, the galaxy would discover the truth about humanity's greatest strength: their absolute refusal to look the other way when someone needs help. The transaction was scheduled for midnight. The human arrived at 11:47. 13 minutes. That's all it took to change everything. Captain Marcus Chen had seen enough of the galaxy's ugliness to fill a dozen lifetimes. So 23 years hauling cargo from system to system had shown him wonders beyond imagination and horrors that made him question whether intelligence was truly a gift or a curse. But nothing had prepared him for what he witnessed in the lower levels of Station Zarian 7. He had only come down here looking for spare parts for his ship's atmospheric recycler. The wandering star was getting old, and keeping her running required constant maintenance and creative solutions. The main market levels charged premium prices for everything, but down in the underbelly of the station, you could find almost anything if you knew where to look and weren't too picky about its origins. The corridors here were dimly lit, filled with the constant hum of aging machinery and the occasional scurrying of maintenance drones. Steam hissed from broken pipes, creating patches of fog that drifted lazily through the air. The smell was a mixture of recycled air, industrial lubricants, and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify but didn't want to think about too hard. He had just finished negotiating with a Vorthon parts dealer for a used air filter when he heard it. A sound that made his blood run cold and his hands clench into fists. It was quiet, barely audible over the station's ambient noise, but unmistakable to anyone who had heard it before. Crying. Not just any crying, but the particular sound of someone trying desperately not to make noise while their world fell apart around them. Marcus had heard it during the war, in refugee camps and bombed-out cities. It was the sound of someone who had learned that making noise could mean death, but whose pain was too great to contain completely. Following the sound, Marcus moved carefully through the maze of service corridors and storage compartments. His hand instinctively moved to the plasma pistol at his hip. A habit formed during too many years in dangerous places. The crying grew slightly louder, coming from somewhere ahead and to his left. He rounded a corner and stopped. There, in a service alcove partially hidden by hanging cables and conduits, sat a figure huddled against the wall. At first glance, Marcus thought it might be a human child, but as his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he realized his mistake. The girl was clearly alien, though humanoid in basic shape. But her skin had a slight blue tint that seemed to shimmer in the poor light, and her hair was silver white, almost luminescent. She appeared young, though with alien species it was often difficult to judge age accurately. What was immediately obvious, however, were the restraint cuffs around her wrists and ankles, and the crude metal collar around her neck. The collar bore markings that Marcus recognized with growing anger. Ownership stamps, property tags. Yet this girl was being treated as merchandise. As he stepped closer, trying not to startle her, the girl looked up. Her eyes were large and violet, filled with a fear so profound it hit Marcus like a physical blow. She shrank back against the wall, clearly expecting violence or worse. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, keeping his hands visible and non-threatening. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Marcus. What's yours?" The girl stared at him for a long moment, the confusion mixing with the fear in her expression. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, shaking her head slightly. Marcus realized she might not understand his language. He touched his throat, where a small universal translator device was implanted. Most spacers had them these days, but they weren't perfect, especially with less common languages or dialects. "Do you understand me now?" he asked, speaking slowly and clearly. This time the girl nodded slightly. You are human?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes, I am." "And you are?" "Zara," she said, then added something that made Marcus's translator struggle for a moment before settling on, "of the Morning Sky Clan." "Zara, that's a beautiful name." Marcus kept his voice gentle, the way he might speak to a wounded animal. "Zara, who did this to you? Who put these restraints on you?" At his question, fresh tears began flowing down her cheeks. The traders took me from my world 3 cycles ago. They said someone was coming tonight to buy me, someone who collects my kind." She touched the collar around her neck with obvious revulsion. "This keeps me from using my abilities. Without them, I am helpless." Marcus felt a familiar cold rage building in his chest. It was the same anger that had driven him to enlist in the Human Defense Force years ago, and the same fury that had sustained him through the worst battles of the border wars. But this was different. This wasn't about territories or resources or political ideologies. This was about a terrified child being sold like cargo. "What kind of abilities?" he asked, genuinely curious despite his anger. Zara hesitated, then said, "My people can sense emotions, feel what others feel. It helps us understand and help each other. But some species value this for other reasons. They use us to manipulate others or," she shuddered, "for entertainment." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, processing this information. Empathic abilities were rare in the galaxy, and he could see how they might be valuable to the wrong kind of person. The thought of someone exploiting a young girl for such purposes made his stomach turn. "Zara, listen to me carefully," he said, opening his eyes and looking directly at her. "I want you to know that what's happening to you is wrong. Taking someone from their home, selling them like property, that's not just illegal in most civilized systems, it's morally reprehensible. No one has the right to own another sentient being." She stared at him in amazement. "You really believe that?" "With every fiber of my being," Marcus replied firmly. "Where I come from, we fought a war with ourselves to end slavery over 200 years ago. Hundreds of thousands died to establish the principle that all sentient beings have the right to freedom and self-determination. But the traders said humans were just another species, no different from any other. They said you wouldn't care about someone like me." Marcus felt his jaw clench. "They lied to you. Humans have many flaws, but we have one trait that our enemies often underestimate. And we have an almost pathological inability to mind our own business when we see injustice being done." For the first time since he'd found her, Zara's expression showed something other than fear. It was hope, fragile and tentative, but unmistakably real. "Does that mean, will you help me?" she asked. Marcus was already mentally calculating the risks and challenges. The station had its own security force, but they were notoriously corrupt. And the traders who had brought Zara here would be armed and dangerous. The buyer was scheduled to arrive soon, which meant time was running out. Getting involved would mean risking his ship, his freedom, and quite possibly his life. It took him exactly 3 seconds to make his decision. "Yes," he said simply, "I'll help you. But we need to move fast. Tell me everything you know about the people who brought you here. How many of them are there? Where are they keeping other prisoners? What kind of weapons do they have?" As Zara began to provide details, Marcus was already formulating a plan. It wouldn't be easy, and the odds of success were far from certain. But he had learned long ago that sometimes the right thing to do and the smart thing to do weren't the same thing, and sometimes being human meant choosing right over smart. The sound of footsteps in the corridor interrupted his thoughts. Multiple sets of boots, moving with purpose. Marcus quickly gestured for Zara to stay silent and pressed himself against the wall, listening. "The buyer's shuttle just docked," a gravelly voice was saying. "Boss wants the merchandise cleaned up and ready for presentation in 15 minutes. "What about the collar?" another voice asked. "Client wants to see a demonstration of her abilities." "We'll remove it just long enough to show what she can do, then put it right back on. It can't have her messing with our heads." The voices were getting closer. Marcus made a quick decision. "Zara, I need you to trust me," he whispered. "When I give the signal, I want you to run back the way I came. There's a junction about 50 meters down the corridor. Take the left passage and keep going until you reach a door marked Emergency Airlock 7. Hide there and wait for me." "What about you?" she whispered back. "I'm going to have a conversation with your captors," Marcus replied, on checking his weapon. "Don't worry about me. I've had worse conversations before." The footsteps were almost at their location now. Marcus took a deep breath, stepped out of the shadows, and prepared to do what humans did best: the unexpected. The 3 Korgan slavers rounded the corner, expecting to collect their merchandise. Instead, they found themselves face to face with a human holding a plasma pistol with the casual confidence of someone who knew exactly how to use it. Gentlemen," Marcus said pleasantly, as if he had just encountered them at a social gathering, "I believe we need to discuss your business practices." The lead Korgan, a massive creature with scarred green skin and tusks that jutted from his lower jaw, reached for his weapon. Marcus's pistol hummed to life, its barrel glowing with barely contained energy. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Marcus continued in the same conversational tone. "You see, I'm having what you might call a moral crisis. I've just discovered that you've been trafficking sentient beings, and my species has some very strong opinions about that sort of thing." The second slaver, smaller but with the quick movements of a natural fighter, spoke up. "This is none of your concern, human. Walk away and forget what you've seen." "That's where you're wrong," Marcus replied. "See, forgetting isn't really one of our talents. We're more the hold grudges for generations and pass them down to our children type of species. It's a character flaw, really." The third Korgan, who had been trying to work his way around to Marcus's blind spot, froze as the human's weapon tracked smoothly to cover him without Marcus even turning his head. "Peripheral vision," Marcus explained helpfully. "Another human trait. We evolved as persistence hunters, which means we're very good at noticing things trying to sneak up on us. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to release all of your prisoners, return them to their homes, and find a new line of work, something more honest. Have you considered agriculture?" The lead Korgan snarled. "You're one human against 3 of us. Even with that weapon, you can't watch all of us at once." Marcus smiled, and something in his expression made all 3 slavers take an involuntary step backward. "You know what the funny thing about humans is? We're not very good at calculating odds when we're angry. We tend to do stupid, impossible things out of sheer spite." He paused, letting that sink in. "For instance, my ship's computer is currently monitoring all communications in this section of the station. If I don't check in with it every 10 minutes, it will automatically transmit a detailed report of your operation to the Galactic Trade Authority, the Human Defense Force, and about 6 different news networks. Well, that report includes recordings of our conversation, detailed scans of your prisoners, and enough evidence to shut down your entire organization. The slavers exchanged uncertain glances. The lead Korgan's hand moved toward his communicator. I wouldn't call for backup either, Marcus added. See, my ships also detected 3 vessels approaching the station. Funny thing about that timing, don't you think? Almost like someone might have called ahead. This was a complete bluff. Marcus's ship was indeed monitoring communications, but it wasn't sending any automatic transmissions. And he had no idea what those approaching ships were, though he hoped they might provide a useful distraction. The key to a good bluff was confidence, and enough truth mixed in to make it believable. The second slaver was looking increasingly nervous. Boss, maybe we should consider his offer. The heat's been getting worse lately, and if the authorities really are involved— Shut up, the lead Korgan snapped. But Marcus could see doubt beginning to creep into his expression. You know what? Marcus said, as if struck by sudden inspiration. Let me make this even simpler for you. I'm going to give you exactly 60 seconds to start releasing your prisoners. If you don't, I'm going to start shooting, and I'm going to keep shooting until either you're all dead or I am. And the thing about humans is, we're absolutely terrible at knowing when to quit. You're bluffing, the lead Korgan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus's expression never changed, but he raised his weapon slightly. 55 seconds. The tension in the corridor was thick enough to cut. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, could smell the fierce sweat from the slavers. Everything depended on the next few moments. 50 seconds, he said quietly. The second slaver broke first. Boss, this is insane. The human's crazy enough to actually do it. 45 seconds. The lead Korgan's hand moved to his weapon again, then stopped. Marcus could see the calculation going on behind his eyes. Even if they managed to kill the human, the consequences would be severe if he was telling the truth about the automatic transmissions and approaching ships. 40 seconds. All right, the lead Korgan snarled. All right, human, but you don't know what you're interfering with. These aren't just random prisoners. The buyer has already paid for specific merchandise. Important people are involved in this transaction. 35 seconds. And I don't care if the buyer is the emperor of the Central Systems himself. Slavery is slavery. The lead Korgan pulled out his communicator with obvious reluctance. Control, this is Harvac. Begin releasing the prisoners from holding cells 1 through 7. A voice crackled back through the device. Sir? The buyer's shuttle has already docked. He's expecting immediate transfer of the merchandise. Tell the buyer there's been a complication, Harvac replied, his eyes never leaving Marcus. The deal is off. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. See how easy that was? Now, about returning them to their homes. That's impossible, the third slaver spoke up for the first time. Some of them were taken weeks ago from dozens of different systems. We don't have the resources for that kind of operation. Then I guess you'll have to get creative, Marcus replied. I hear the Refugee Assistance Coalition pays good money for information about displaced persons. Might even be enough to compensate for your lost profits. The communicator crackled again. Boss, we've got a problem. The buyer isn't taking no for an answer. He says he has a contract and he's bringing security to collect his property. Marcus's expression hardened. What kind of buyer brings security to a simple transaction? Harvac's laugh was bitter. The kind who owns half the station administrators and doesn't like to be disappointed. You've made an enemy tonight, human. A very dangerous one. Before Marcus could respond, the lights in the corridor flickered and dimmed. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow. Over the station's communication system, a calm, automated voice announced, Attention all personnel. This station is now under lockdown protocols. All docking bays are sealed. This is not a drill. The slavers looked as confused as Marcus felt. "What the hell is going on?" Harvack demanded. His communicator crackled with frantic chatter from his crew. "Boss! Boss! The prisoners are gone! All of them! The holding cells are empty!" "What do you mean, gone?" Harvack roared. "I mean gone, sir. The doors were opened from the outside, and there's no sign of the prisoners anywhere. And, sir, there are humans on the station. A lot of humans." Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with confusion. He hadn't called for backup, but apparently backup had arrived anyway. The communicator continued. "Sir, we're getting reports of armed humans throughout the lower levels. They're systematically dismantling every illegal operation they can find. Weapons smuggling, organ trading, everything." "How many humans are we talking about?" Harvack demanded. "Unknown, sir. They seem to be everywhere at once. And, sir, they're not just taking prisoners. They're documenting everything. Recording faces, taking samples, copying data files. It's like they're building a case." Marcus was beginning to understand. "You know, I may have forgotten to mention something," he said casually. "Before I came down here, I transmitted a general distress call on human emergency frequencies. And it's a special channel we use when one of our people finds themselves in trouble far from home." The slavers stared at him. So, the thing about humans is we're pack animals. Mess with one of us and you tend to get all of us. And there are a lot more humans in this sector than most people realize." Harvack's communicator erupted with another transmission. All units! The buyer's security team has opened fire on human civilians in Docking Bay 7. Repeat, shots have been fired!" The automated voice came over the station's speakers again. "Attention! Due to hostile action against civilian personnel, this station is now under emergency protection protocols. Station security is authorized to use lethal force against any individual threatening civilian safety." Marcus grinned. "And now you've made it a human protection issue. That's what we call in the business a very bad day for you." The sound of running footsteps echoed through the corridors. They're growing closer. Multiple sets of boots, moving with military precision. The slavers looked around frantically, realizing they were surrounded. "Drop your weapons!" a voice shouted from the darkness. "This is Captain Sarah Martinez, Human Defense Force Reserve. You are under arrest for violations of interstellar trafficking laws." More voices joined in from other directions. "Exit blocked! Corridor secured! No weapons detected on the human civilian!" A woman emerged from the shadows, wearing the distinctive black and silver uniform of the HDF. She was followed by a squad of armed humans, all moving with the coordinated efficiency of trained soldiers. "Captain Chen," she said, recognizing Marcus despite the circumstances. "Should have known we'd find you in the middle of this mess." "Captain Martinez," Marcus replied with a relieved smile. "I was wondering when the cavalry would arrive. We got your emergency transmission about 30 minutes ago. Took us a while to organize a response, but once we realized the scope of the operation," she gestured at the slavers, who were now on their knees with their hands behind their heads. "Let's just say the humans in this sector take a very dim view of slavery." As the HDF soldiers secured the prisoners, Marcus found himself thinking about Zara. He hoped she had made it to the emergency airlock safely. "Ma'am," one of the soldiers reported, we've secured 17 prisoners from the holding cells. They're being processed for medical attention and repatriation." "Any sign of a young female, blue-skinned, empathic species?" Marcus asked. The soldier nodded. "Safe and sound, sir. She's the one who told us where to find you." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. Zara was safe, and the other prisoners were being rescued. The slavers would face justice, and their operation was shut down. But as Captain Martinez approached him for debriefing, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The buyer with his security team was still out there somewhere on the station, and if he was as dangerous as Harvack suggested, the night was far from over. In the distance, the sound of gunfire echoed through the station's corridors. The real fight was just beginning. The sound of gunfire growing closer made Captain Martinez's expression harden. She spoke rapidly into her communicator while her soldiers maintained their positions around the captured slavers. "Command, this is Martinez. What's the status on that hostile security team?" The response crackled with static and the distant sound of weapons fire. "Captain, the buyer has barricaded himself and his men in Docking Bay 7 with approximately 20 mercenaries. They're demanding the return of their property and threatening to kill hostages." Marcus felt his blood chill. "Oh, hostages?" "Station personnel," Martinez confirmed grimly. "Maintenance workers who were in the wrong place at the wrong time." From his position on the ground, Harvac laughed bitterly. "I told you, human, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Vex Koran doesn't take disappointment well. He'll burn this entire station down before he leaves empty-handed." "Vex Koran?" Martinez's expression darkened further. "The Collector? You know this guy?" Marcus asked. "By reputation. He's a Zilonian crime lord who specializes in acquiring rare and exotic sentient beings for his private collection. Intelligence suggests he has political connections throughout the Outer Rim systems." She paused, listening to another transmission through her earpiece. "And he apparently has a small army with him tonight." Marcus checked his weapon. "How many hostages?" "Unknown." "But Marcus, this isn't your fight anymore. We've got HDF personnel en route, and station security is finally taking this seriously." "With respect, Captain, this became my fight the moment I found that girl crying in a service corridor." Marcus started toward the sound of gunfire. "Besides, you know what they say about humans and impossible odds." "Captain Chen," Martinez called after him. "That's an order." Marcus paused and turned back with a grin. "Good thing I resigned my commission 5 years ago, then." Before Martinez could stop him, that Marcus was jogging down the corridor toward Docking Bay 7. Behind him, he could hear her cursing creatively in 3 different languages while organizing her troops to follow. The corridors leading to the docking bay showed signs of recent combat. Scorch marks from energy weapons decorated the walls, and several automated systems had been damaged. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow, while the station's air recyclers struggled to clear the smoke. As Marcus approached the final junction before the docking bay, he nearly collided with a small figure emerging from a side passage. "Captain Marcus!" Zara's voice was filled with relief and worry. "You came!" "Zara, what are you doing here? You should be with the other rescued prisoners." "I couldn't leave," she said, her violet eyes intense with purpose. "Not while innocent people are suffering because of me." "This isn't because of you," Marcus said firmly. This is because some people choose to do evil things and other people choose to stop them." "But I can help," Zara insisted. "My abilities. Even with this collar, I can still sense emotions. I can tell you where the hostages are, how many guards there are, what they're feeling." Marcus hesitated. The tactical advantage would be invaluable, but the risk to Zara was enormous. "Please," she said softly. "Let me help save them." Let me do something good with the abilities they wanted to exploit." After a moment, Marcus nodded. "Stay behind me at all times. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" Together, they made their way to the observation deck overlooking Docking Bay 7. The scene below was tense and dangerous. A sleek shuttle occupied the center of the bay, while armed mercenaries had taken positions behind cargo containers and equipment. In the center of their perimeter, 6 station personnel knelt with their hands bound, clearly terrified. Standing over the hostages was a tall, pale humanoid with elongated features and cold, black eyes. Even without Zara's confirmation, Marcus knew this had to be Vex Koran. The Collector moved with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way through intimidation and violence. "What can you sense?" Marcus whispered to Zara. She closed her eyes, concentrating despite the collar's interference with her abilities. 22 armed beings below. The pale one, his emotions are cold, controlled, but underneath there's anger. Deep anger. He considers this a personal insult. What about the hostages? Terrified but alive. One is injured but not critically. She paused, her expression troubled. Captain Marcus, there's something else. 2 of the mercenaries, they're not like the others. Their emotions are strange, distant. I think they might be artificial. Androids or cyborgs, then. That complicated things significantly. A voice echoed through the docking bay's communication system. It was cultured, speaking with the accent of the core worlds. I know you're listening, humans. I have a simple proposition. Return my property to me, and I will release these innocents and depart peacefully. Marcus found a comm panel and activated it. This is Captain Chen. Yet the people you're referring to as property are free sentient beings. They're not yours to own. Corin's laughter was cold and mocking. Ah, the heroic human. I should have expected this. Your species has such a tedious obsession with moral principles. It's gotten us this far, Marcus replied. Here's my counteroffer. Release the hostages, surrender yourself and your men, and maybe you'll live long enough to see a trial. You misunderstand the situation, Captain. I have superior numbers. Superior firepower and hostages. What exactly do you think you can accomplish? Marcus was studying the layout below, formulating a plan. The bay had multiple entry points, but Coran's men had them covered. There was, however, an emergency maintenance shaft that led directly under the shuttle's landing pad. Zara, I need you to do something for me. Can you sense if there are any guards near the maintenance access? She concentrated again. 2 guards, but they're focused on watching the main entrances. They're not paying attention to the floor level. Marcus activated his communicator, reaching out to Martinez on HDF frequencies. Captain, I have a plan, but I need a distraction. Marcus, where are you? We've reached the outer perimeter. Observation Deck 7. Listen, in exactly 3 minutes, I need you to make a lot of noise at the main entrance. Draw their attention. What are you planning? Something stupid and impossible, just like you'd expect from a human. Before Martinez could respond, Marcus was already moving. He led Zara to the maintenance access point, carefully avoiding the sight lines from below. I want you to wait here, he told her. If this goes wrong, if you hear sustained gunfire, I want you to find Captain Martinez and get out of here. What are you going to do? Marcus checked his weapon and the small pack of emergency supplies every spacer carried. I'm going to remind Coran why humans have such a bad reputation for doing the impossible. The maintenance shaft was cramped and poorly lit, but it led directly to where he needed to be. Marcus crawled through the narrow space, counting down the seconds until Martinez's distraction. Right on schedule, the sound of human voices shouting demands echoed through the bay. Coran's mercenaries immediately shifted their attention toward the main entrance, exactly as Marcus had hoped. And he emerged from the maintenance access directly beneath Coran's shuttle, invisible to the guards above. Working quickly, he attached small charges from his emergency kit to key structural points on the shuttle. They wouldn't destroy the vessel, but they would ensure it wasn't going anywhere. The next part was the dangerous bit. Marcus climbed up onto the shuttle's landing strut and from there onto its hull. Corin was standing less than 10 meters away, and his attention focused on the standoff with Martinez's forces. Marcus took a deep breath, said a quick prayer to whatever gods looked after foolish humans, and jumped. He landed hard on Coran's back, driving the collector to the ground and sending his weapon skittering across the deck. The mercenaries spun around in confusion, unsure how to react without risking their employer. "Nobody move!" Marcus shouted, pressing his plasma pistol against Corin's head. "Hey, the first person who raises a weapon, your boss becomes a decorative stain on the deck." The standoff that followed was tense and fragile. Marcus could feel Corin's muscles tensing beneath him, and he knew the collector was calculating his chances of escape. "You cannot possibly believe this will end well for you," Corin said, his voice strained but still controlled. "Kill me, and my men will slaughter every human on this station." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "Yeah, but you know what humans are really good at? Making sure the other guy goes down with us." "Boss!" one of the mercenaries called out. "HDF troops are breaching the secondary entrances." The sound of coordinated movement echoed through the bay as Martinez's soldiers entered from multiple points, catching Karan's men in a crossfire. The two android mercenaries Zara had identified moved to engage, but they found themselves facing military-grade EMP grenades that sent them crashing to the deck. Within minutes, it was over. The mercenaries, faced with overwhelming odds and the loss of their leadership, surrendered. The hostages were freed, and Karan found himself in HDF custody. As the situation was secured, Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Zara standing beside him, her expression filled with gratitude and something else he couldn't quite identify. "It's over?" she asked quietly. "It's over," he confirmed. "You're free. All of the prisoners are free. What happens now?" Marcus looked around the bay where HDF personnel were processing prisoners and tending to the wounded. Now you get to decide what you want to do with your life. That's what freedom means." Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to help others like me, others who are taken from their homes and sold like cargo. I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Marcus smiled. "You know, there are organizations that do exactly that kind of work. The Refugee Assistance Coalition, the Anti-Trafficking Alliance, even some branches of the HDF. With your abilities and your experience, you could make a real difference. Would you help me? I don't know anything about your galaxy or how things work out here." Marcus thought about his ship, his cargo routes, his simple life hauling freight from system to system. Then he thought about Zara's courage, and her determination to turn her suffering into something positive. "You know what? I think it's time I found a new line of work anyway. Freight hauling was getting boring." Captain Martinez approached them, shaking her head with a mixture of exasperation and admiration. "Captain Chen, that was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest." "Why can't it be both?" Marcus replied. "Because brave and stupid are supposed to be mutually exclusive," she said. And then her expression softened. "But I guess that's what makes you humans so dangerous. You do the impossible and make it look easy." As they walked away from Docking Bay 7, leaving behind the wreckage of Koran's operation, Marcus reflected on the events of the night. He had come to the station looking for spare parts, and instead had found something much more important. He had found a purpose. Behind them, Zara looked back once at the place where her captivity had ended and her new life had begun. The collar around her neck was gone, removed by HDF medical personnel, and she could feel her abilities returning in full. But more than that, she could feel something she had thought was lost forever. Hope. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, filled with those who would exploit the weak for profit. But it was also filled with people like Marcus Chen and Captain Martinez, that humans who would risk everything to do what was right. And sometimes, Zara thought as she followed Marcus toward his ship, that was enough to change everything. The wandering star lifted off from Station Zarian 3 hours later, carrying Marcus and Zara toward their first mission with the Anti-Trafficking Alliance. In the cargo hold, instead of manufactured goods and raw materials, they carried hope for the hundreds of beings still trapped in slavery throughout the galaxy. It was, that Marcus reflected, a much better cargo than spare parts. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of possibilities and new challenges. But they faced those challenges together, human and alien united in common cause. And in a galaxy where darkness often seemed to triumph, that unity was a light that could never be extinguished.